Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. So many exciting things happening in the Kohberger case, the Idaho 4. The Judge Hippler, has made decisions over the past week that not only have pushed this case forward, but have fast-forwarded this case to a schedule that will have them starting to pick the jury on August 4th. And clearly pick the jury, start the voir dire process, and until a jury is fully seated, which we know is 12 jurors. And in this case, Judge Hippler requested there be 8 alternates. So 12 jurors and 8 alternates. And that's going to begin on August 4th. And until the jury is seated, the defense and the prosecution will work on selecting a jury. Why is this one of the most important things to do, especially with a capital case? All of the people that will be filling out questionnaires, which is basically a pre-screening document, because certain people will just be excluded based on what they write on the juror questionnaire. And then how many people will they actually interview? And what type of questions will they be asking? What will the defense be asking? What will the prosecution be asking? What type of person is the defense looking for? And what type of person is the prosecution looking for? 2 different types. And they will use their challenges to eliminate people that they feel aren't the type of person they want on this jury. So we're going to discuss that with my expert co-host tonight, Professor Mike Geary, who's also an attorney. We're going to discuss how important it is to pick jurors in this case. One of the most important things. So folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your thoughts, hold on to your opinions. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting action. And with baseball in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting. From Major League Baseball, UFC to tennis and NFL futures, BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. Head to the website today and take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. BetOnline, the game starts here. So I'm really excited to cover this topic tonight because no one has really covered this. And this is one of the most important topics because no one expected this case to go forward on time, or everyone was waiting to see what would Judge Hippler do. Was Judge Hippler going to rule, look, this case was supposed to start on August 11th. And guess what? Judge Hippler gave 1 more week. So now it's going to start on August 18th. But the voir dire process is going to start on August 4th, and the choosing of a jury will commence. Joining me tonight to talk on this very important topic, retired NYPD Sergeant, Professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Bill. Thank you for having me on. Good to see you. Good evening.
You know, Mike, I can't stress enough how important this whole process is in picking a jury. In fact, this is where cases are won and lost, in the process of choosing jurors. And so important. And I think the edge goes to the defense in this case, these cases usually. Doesn't defense have more challenges than the prosecution?
No, they're equal. They're equal. Both have 10 peremptory challenges, which means that both the prosecution and the defense could knock potential jurors off the jury for no cause whatsoever. They're limited to 10 each. But there's other kinds of challenges, but they're both equal. They're both given equal weight. But the defense, remember, the defense only has to convince one of the jurors that there is some reasonable doubt, and the prosecution has to convince all 12 that there is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So there's a difference, of course, in the way that they have to present their evidence and their burdens of proof. But they're starting out at the juror picking level, the voir dire, they're equal at that point. Yeah.
You know, Mike, so these are some suggested questions for screening a jury panel. First of all, the expected length of this trial is supposed to be from August 18th right into November.
Right.
So it will not be rushed in any shape or form. This trial will take as long as it takes. Jury service obviously interferes with personal lives and work. So inconvenience does not excuse a person from service on the jury. If it did, we would not have trial by jury for the benefit of our citizens for over 250 years. This country is very proud of the jury service of its citizens. You know, but there has to be some questions that make it fair. Health questions. Is there a health matter that would excuse someone? Do they have a heart problem? Do they have do they need oxygen? Is there a reason they can't sit in a jury box? They're not physically able to do that. Medications, all of those things have to be asked, and those type of people have to be screened from getting on the jury. Do you believe the nature of the crime charge will prevent you from being a fair juror? Oh, very fair question. Have you or has a person close to you been the victim of a crime? Very, very important, because that can prejudice you, right?
Right.
Have you or has a person close to you been accused or convicted of committing a crime?
That's huge.
There's another one. Do you or does a person close to you have a pending criminal case?
Right.
If you answered yes to any of the last three questions, is there anything about that matter which will prevent you from being a fair juror? Have you been a witness in the trial in a criminal case? And then there's, of course, the police questions, because not everyone, many people don't trust the police, right? Mm-hmm. Have you had an interaction or experience with a police officer or other law enforcement person, or formed an opinion about police or of criminal justice system that would prevent you from being a fair juror? Has even from getting a summons to being reprimanded by the police, that could affect how you would respond as a juror, Mike?
Sure. What they're trying to do is in the health questions, they're just asking people to can you physically endure the hardships of, in isolation for 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, where there's going to be limited breaks, that sort of thing. The questions about, have you ever been a victim of a crime? Have you ever been accused of a crime? Have you stood trial for a crime? Anyone in your family has ever done that? Those are important, because you got to figure out what are people's perceptions. You're not going to get perfect people. You're going to get people with, life experience. And they do want to know, what is your attitude? I mean, you could have been arrested for, say, marijuana possession when you were 17, but you're 35 years old now. And that was just when you were a kid. And, whatever, you feel like, whatever, the police are good, the police are bad, whatever. I don't have any preconceived notions that they're all good or they're all bad. I'm willing to listen to what people have to say and make up my own mind. That's what they're looking for. But, the defense wants to hear certain things, would desire to hear certain responses, and the prosecution would rather hear other responses. So it's a chess match at this point to seat 12 people. Plus, I think Judge Hippler wanted at least 6 alternates.
No, he wants 8. He wants 8 alternates.
Wow,
so
okay.
A total of 20.
8. All right.
Mike, some other questions. Do you have a belief, religious, philosophical, or otherwise, that would prevent you from sitting in judgment of a person and voting guilty or not guilty? Is there any reason you cannot be fair in reaching a verdict, guilty or not guilty? Is there anything about your possible service on this jury that you should or wish to discuss with the defense or the prosecution that has not already been asked from you? And then there's specific voir dire questions. A fair juror is a person who will keep the promise to be fair and impartial and will not base the decision in this case upon a bias or prejudice in favor of or against a person who may appear in this trial on account of that person's race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender, identity or expression, religion, religious practice, age, disability, or sexual orientation. A fair juror must be mindful of any stereotypes or attitudes about people or about groups of people that the juror may have and must not allow those stereotypes or attitudes to affect their decision. So they want a clear-minded person, a person that can be fair, a person that is open-minded. Let's go to the other side of the coin, Mike. What are a genre, let's say, of people that the defense does not want on the jury?
I think the defense and Taylor, I do not think she wants older men, older women. I don't think she wants people who are homeowners. I don't think she wants those kind of people, people that have been working for many, many years in the area. I don't think she wants that because homeowners and people who have been around a long time, older people, tend to be a little bit more conservative if you're a homeowner. Now, this case, remember, involves not only the slaughter of 4 people, 4 homicides, but also a burglary. So people who own homes, you're always worried about your property, and that burglary is a huge violation of your property rights. So I think Ann Taylor will try to stay away from, the older male, older female kind of person, the homeowner.
Absolutely. And then there's some educational questions. How many years did you attend school, or what diplomas or what degrees did you obtain in what area of education? They usually don't want people who are too overeducated. They want people sort of in the middle of the road, maybe some college educated, some high school educated, but surely they want open-minded people. If you're employed, what type of work do you do? Or if you are retired, what type of work did you do? Are you married? If yes, and your spouse is employed, what type of work does your spouse do? Do you have children? If the children are adults and employed, what type of work do they do? So they're covering all these bases. Have you served on a trial in a criminal case before? If yes, did the jury reach a verdict? Have you ever served on a trial in a civil case? Have you ever served on a grand jury? Are you or anyone close to you employed now? Have you anyone close to you been employed by a court of law enforcement agency? So they used to, many years ago, totally disqualify law enforcement officers.
Sure.
They didn't want them. That's not true any longer. In fact, Bobby Chacon, retired FBI agent that's been on this show numerous times and is a talking head on a lot of TV stations. He was on a homicide trial last year for 3 months. And he is not just a retired law enforcement FBI agent with 27 years of service. He's also an attorney. So they checked both those boxes, and they picked someone that years ago they would have never chosen, a law enforcement officer and also an attorney. Why do you think they did that, Mike?
Whatever Bobby said, he presented himself as a fair-minded person. And I think that was attractive enough to the defense to think that, well, look, he's one of 12. He seems fair. He's retired. Maybe he can kind of figure out if the police are stretching the truth a little bit here. Maybe he might be a little cynical. When I was a sergeant, right before I retired, I got on a jury for a civil case, but they settled within like just 1 day. But they saw me as like somebody who was fair-minded. I said, look, I'm an attorney. I'm a sergeant. I'm in uniformed force in the NYPD, but I'll give both sides a fair chance. That's all they wanted to hear. And I meant it. Just look, I have no irons in this fire, no dog in this fight. Whatever, it's a civil case, I'll deal with it. So Bobby must have been the same way. He was thoughtful enough to say, I'll give both sides a fair chance. And I think the defense is looking for a fair chance because it's
I think he was believable in that. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share us with your friends and your family. And if you would like to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can join our YouTube channel membership. And every week lately, I've been putting up 2 quizzes per week. So we're trying to educate our membership, and people love the quizzes. And believe it, this getting a little bit competitive where people are like, I got them all right, or I got them all wrong, you know. So I don't know if they're looking up the answers, but it's been very popular. Anyway, thank Carol Grayston. She just donated 5 memberships to some 5 lucky people, gifted 5 police off the cuff memberships. Thank you very much, Carol. Much appreciated. Also, in this case, there has been some witnesses that we really haven't heard much from, and specifically witnesses that were going to be required to go to a Monroe County, Pennsylvania court and be asked questions, because they cannot actually force them at this point to testify or make them go to Idaho. So one of them was a jail guard, and that is sort of interesting. Let me play this from Live Court TV.
Quadruple murder trial. And as the countdown continues, new court documents are revealing a growing witness list. A total of 7 people are now set to appear in court in the coming weeks in Pennsylvania to determine whether they should have to testify during the trial. That group includes a jail guard from the facility that Kohberger was held in before he was extradited to Idaho. Last week, we heard about this little DoorDash driver body cam as a potential witness. She delivered food to one of the victims on the night of the murder, said she saw Kohberger at the crime scene. She'll be a big witness. She was arrested for a DUI. And, you know, some people say, well, I know the sheriff. She says, I'm a witness in Kohberger's case. Take a listen.
Testify against Bryan next year.
Bryan?
Yep, I killed all the girls over in Moscow.
And
now I have to testify. I'm in case here, so yeah, because I'm a DoorDash driver, so yeah.
you have to testify in which murder
Murder
case?
case with college girl.
Oh.
All right, so we're asking, that to me is just off the wall, but we know about her now.
It's really not off the wall. Really, it's very, she's a very important witness. I don't know why that broadcaster said it's off the wall. She was arrested for driving under the influence, which turned out to be a prescription drug. Mm-hmm. So many people are already like disqualifying her because, oh, she was arrested and because she was under the influence. But let's all realize, and we've discussed this on numerous cases before, she was interviewed back in November of 2022. And undoubtedly, they did an in-depth interview and they really dug into, did you actually see Bryan Kohberger? And could you or would you pick him out of what's known as a photo array? That's a photo array. They would have done a photo lineup. And one of the 6 pictures would have been of Bryan Kohberger. And if she picked him out of a photo array, that is extremely, extremely powerful evidence and important evidence. So this broadcast is saying, oh, it's a little crazy. No, it's not. No, it is not. And you can judge her for who she is, but she could be an extremely valuable witness, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, she seems a little bit unsteady when she's talking to the arresting officer. That's fine because she's under the influence of some narcotic. However, you know, what she said there was just explaining who she was and why she was taking the medicine, I think, for some muscular issue she was having. I can't think of the name of it. So she was just trying to explain to the officer who she was. That's all. This lady is like a lot of other people. She needs a little bit of help and a little bit of understanding. If she can say that, and the police know this already, obviously, like you said, from November 2022 or early December 2022, she's made a statement to the police about what she saw that night, what she didn't see that night, what time she was there, what she did, and when she left. All of those things have been recorded. So therefore, there's nothing wrong with this witness. She may have said to the police, I saw a young guy sitting in a white Hyundai. She may have said, I just saw a white Hyundai. She may have said, I saw somebody walking to the back of the house. We don't know exactly, but Ann Taylor has known for years now, and the prosecution has had her statement for years now. So therefore, she may be a very vital witness in this case.
100%. Let's go back to this live court TV.
She wasn't in the initial affidavit, probable cause affidavit, but she'll be testifying. How are the new witnesses going to affect Kohberger's trial? Let's talk about it here to discuss. Criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Franz Borchardt still with us, and criminologist and professor at St. Thomas University, Dr. Debbie Goodman here. I want to start with this DoorDash driver. So we didn't know about her until this DUI arrest, and then the body camera comes out and she blurts it out.
One of the reasons that she may not have been in the probable cause affidavit was that he was arrested before they interviewed her. So he was. Let me retract that. He was arrested on December 30th.
Right.
They had her before that. They may not have used her testimony or her identification for the probable cause because they had two other things that established probable cause. One, of course, was the DNA on the button of the knife sheath. That was all the probable cause they needed. So did they need to reveal her at that point?
No.
They revealed that they had a DoorDash driver. I think they never identified her.
That's right.
So as I said early in this case, and I still say, I believe the prosecution has tons of evidence that they have not revealed. And everyone that covers this case thinks, oh, it wasn't in the affidavit. That means they don't have anything. I just, going back over this case, I just also read recently that there was 2 blood stains in his apartment in Washington. They never revealed who those blood stains belonged to. There was also hairs, animal hairs. Could those animal hairs come back to be from the dog Murphy? Very possible. So we don't know everything. People think, oh, they revealed. They did not reveal everything. So the prosecution is holding some wild cards in their back pocket. Mike.
Yeah, they don't have to reveal everything at all to the public at this point. The only time we really, in the past, say 3 or 4 months, that we've heard a lot about the prosecution's case is through Ann Taylor's challenging of the evidence. Every time she challenges the evidence, admissibility of certain evidence like the DNA, we get the state's answer, and the state's answer will include all kinds of information that nobody ever knew before, and that goes to Judge Hippler, and Judge Hippler makes his decision. So if not for Ann Taylor actually challenging certain bits of information, we wouldn't hear what the prosecution has. And I am sure that if there is any other really strong evidence that Ann Taylor could not think of a grounds to challenge it, then it's going to come in because she hasn't challenged it. And it could be, could be potentially a lot more evidence that we have no idea. But Ann Taylor knows, Kohberger knows, the prosecution knows, the judge knows, Judge Hippler, but the public doesn't know. We'll see it. All those other little things, we will, including the DoorDash driver's report to the police, we'll see it in real time at the start of the trial.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me go back to live court TV.
Oh, thank you so much. Good morning. And how huge is it? I think it's colossal, Ted. I really do. At the moment, you mentioned Dylan, and I don't regard her necessarily as an eyewitness who could directly point out in court and say, that's the guy I saw, Bryan Kohberger. She should not be pressured to do that. What she will say, as you mentioned, is the description of the bushy eyebrows and the face covering. Now we move to the 44-year-old DoorDash driver going by the initials MM. I think it's huge, Ted, for 2 reasons. One of which is she could literally be the eyewitness on this case. If we have an individual who can say that they saw Bryan Kohberger at the time and place of these savage slaughters, and if she could say she saw his car, I think that's very significant. And the second issue is it would give us a really succinct and specific time frame of when these murders took place. At the moment, we think the delivery of the food was at or near 4 a.m., but investigators think that the actual murders took place within the time time frame of 4:07 and 4:21, so that 13 to 14 minute window of time can be solidified. So I am truly looking forward to hearing about what this woman saw and what she has to say.
Franz, we found out about this woman because
I believe, and I agree with Dr. Debbie. I think that Dylan Mortensen's testimony about the bushy eyebrows, about seeing this tall, thin guy, not muscular, but with an athletic build, I think that's strong evidence. But the DoorDash driver, if she can officially say that was Bryan Kohberger, that puts him on the scene moments or minutes before the murders. And that is huge, putting someone on the scene in, again, circumstantial evidence.
That's right.
The white Hyundai Elantra driving around, caught on ring cameras. That's strong evidence too. Add or add the DoorDash driver to that. And I don't think the circumstantial evidence becomes so powerful. And all the people that say, oh, it doesn't mean it. No, it means a lot. It means a lot. If you're a fair-minded person, if you have a good brain, if you have a good head on your shoulders, you're putting 2 + 2 and it's equaling 4, Mike.
Yeah, people always, deride circumstantial evidence. Oh, there's no direct evidence of guilt. It's all circumstantial. Yeah, that's 99% of all the evidence you're going to get in a criminal trial is circumstantial. DNA evidence is circumstantial. Fingerprints is circumstantial. Bloody clothing, knife, purchasing the knife, driving the car, the getaway car, all of that is circumstantial evidence, and it's really powerful. In this case, it just allows the jury to make logical inferences about what happened. And so it is really powerful evidence.
Some of the folks in the chat are talking about, and I'll do this because I want to give both sides of the fence here. There was no blood in his car, right? There was no blood that they found anywhere in his car. And that is true. And to tell you the truth, that is hard to believe. That really is hard to believe, that the slaughter that took place here, the slaughter of 4 human beings with a knife, and also the fact that we don't know if, in fact, Bryan Kohberger cut himself. When you kill someone with a knife and it's that violent, usually the perpetrator cuts himself and leaves his or her blood on the scene. As far as we know, that didn't happen. As far as we know, there was no blood recovered inside his car, as far as we know. And that could be, there could have been blood, but we don't know that yet, right? But that is highly unusual. So how could that have happened? Okay, he was wearing something like a Tyvek suit that covered him head to toe. He had booties on covering his shoes, right? He had gloves covering his hands, maybe heavy-duty gloves, so that when the knife got blood on it and it slipped, it didn't slip out of his hands because he had these big, thick gloves. And under the thick gloves were some latex gloves. And then when he reached his vehicle, when he was ready to flee, he had perhaps a garbage bag ready, and he undressed right outside his car and threw all of, he disposed of, say, the Tyvek suit or the bodysuit he was wearing and the gloves and all that stuff inside this bag, tied it, and then put it inside the car and disposed of it someplace else. That's all that I could explain, that how he could have avoided this. And look, he was a thinker. He was a PhD student. He wanted to get away with this crime. So he took steps to get away with this crime. And the big thing that everyone is harping upon, where is the knife? Most killers get rid of the murder weapon. They don't want to keep it as a souvenir because that is just the most important piece of evidence. So somehow Kohberger got rid of that knife. Did he throw it in that river? Did he go into the woods and bury it at a preordained place? Or did he get rid of it some other way? There's millions of ways he could have gotten rid of it. But that bothers everyone, that K-bar knife has never been recovered. If, in fact, people question whether the murder weapon even was a K-bar knife. And the only people that can say that is the pathologist, the medical doctor that performed the autopsies. Mike.
Yeah, Bill. We remember that when the police went to his Washington University apartment after he was there and after he'd left, they did a search warrant and they found, I think, a receipt for Dickies. And Dickies are those overalls that you could put on. And so probably you're right. He had some sort of overall pants on, and like you say, probably booties out on his shoes. And remember, he planned this. This wasn't like an act of violence that was unplanned or spontaneous or an act of passion, where somebody does something and they're like, oh my goodness, and they just try to cover up later on. He had planned this really well. And so he executed it as good as he can. He made a lot of mistakes, but he executed some things really, really well, and getting rid of all that. Plus, he probably had that car detailed several times in quick succession over the course of like a couple of days. That's what I would do. Have that thing vacuum shampooed like you can't believe, and do that. So unfortunately, that's what we think the explanation is, because we have that receipt for Dickies overalls. So there are, some people might be the thing that says, oh, there's he couldn't have done it because there was not a single drop of blood in his car. Yeah, I would love to have a drop of one of those poor victims' blood in his car. That would be a slam dunk for the prosecution. But it doesn't hurt the prosecution's case that car was clean.
Mike, when the police went to Pennsylvania, he was seen going into his car and he was cleaning it with bleach.
Yeah.
And he was wearing gloves, and he was taking the garbage from his family's house and throwing it in his neighbor's garbage cans. Is that not the work of someone that is trying to cover up something? Absolutely. His two sisters believed that his behavior was so bizarre, and the report was that the killer was driving a white Hyundai Elantra. They thought he was the killer, his own sisters. So they started looking at his car for evidence. Now, I don't know what level of interview/interrogation his two sisters received. They may have told the FBI and the police investigators something that was incriminating against their own brother. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, we don't know because Ann Taylor hasn't challenged anything regarding them. So there may be something there that really shines a light on Kohberger's personality and his characteristics and his traits. I see it as consciousness of guilt. If you take your car and you're scrubbing it down with bleach, that's not the ordinary thing that someone would do. That's something that people see on TV through those crime scene shows, CSI Miami, where they're told, oh yeah, bleach kills blood and you can't get the DNA out of it and stuff like that. Yeah, that's true. So some people might say, look, he's just a guy who's really particular about his car. Yeah, and other people like you and me are like, wait a second, that's a little too much. But you're right. If there may be his sisters may have said something very strange about his behavior. We'll see. We don't know, but hopefully that will come out.
My other question is, what level of interrogation did his father receive? And did his father answer questions, or did he lawyer right up? Because even though his father was not a suspect, you always have the right, when the police want to question you, could say, I choose not to answer questions without counsel. And I don't know if he did that. But he also may have said something that incriminated his son. Remember when they were pulled over by the Indiana State Police, and they talked about going for like Thai food, something like that? Was pretty bizarre, Yeah. It seemed like really you're driving out of your way and you're going to get Thai food. And it was the second time they were pulled over in a very short period of time. Well, they were looking for Thai food. That was a little bizarre.
No, I don't think you see Thai food when you're driving west to east on Route 90 or Route 80. There's all those stops every 20 miles, and there's no Thai food there. I'm sorry, there's no Thai food. No,
absolutely. So, let me go back to this.
Down on their alternate suspect theory, but the judge wants some evidence to back it up.
Additional information there. What I'd like is by the 23rd, if possible, for the defense to do two things. One, provide me with whatever actual evidence you have that supports those allegations, rather than just allegations. And two, provide for me how it is you believe that what you are offering is admissible. Because it seemed to me much of what you had put in there was fairly potentially fairly objectionable in terms of admissibility.
Okay, so the judge wants.
So that was about the alternate suspect. And Judge Hippler threw that right the hell out. Because first of all, Ann Taylor got that information from the tips log.
Right.
So she obtained four suspects, alleged suspects, from the police, their own tips log. And the police apparently, they had interviewed every tip and they dismissed this as having nothing to it. But yet, Ann Taylor is grasping at straws and presented four names with no evidence whatsoever, and Judge Hippler was not having it and threw it right the hell out, citing case law, not just throwing it out because he doesn't like Ann Taylor, citing case law and saying you can't point a finger at someone unless you have evidence, and you have none. So he wouldn't allow it, Mike.
Yeah, he made the right decision, because if Ann Taylor got up there in court and publicly announced that, Bill Cannon or Michael Geary is a suspect in this case and should be investigated, implying that we're murderers, that could be grounds for a defamation lawsuit. So Hippler's like, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to start throwing out people's names unless there is a foundation based on some evidence that the police looked at and found. But in these cases, the only thing that ties these people to the cases, they're all Moscow, Idaho residents, and they're from the local area. None of them have a Hyundai. They all took DNA tests. They all passed. And so they were investigated by the police. It wasn't like the police got these four names and didn't bother. No, they were actually part of the investigation and they were cleared. So therefore, thank goodness that Judge Hippler did the right thing and said, no way, you are not throwing out four names in the middle of the courtroom.
Mike, I think that, and I'm so glad that Judge Hippler did that, but that was even more ridiculous than the alibi that, oh yes, Bryan loves to go driving around in the middle of the night at 2 degrees below zero and go into parks and look at stars. Ridiculous, in my opinion. And something. There's certain people that say, "Oh, I do that all the time."
You do.
Oh yeah, sure you do. Well, then you should be sent to a mental institution too. But it makes no sense. So Ann Taylor wanted to raise that, of course, as an alibi witness, as an alibi. This is where he was. Except let's not forget, 23 times they have evidence of Bryan Kohberger reconning 1122 King Road, surveilling that location on 23 prior occasions. So how then does the alibi of going out sightseeing, stargazing at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the winter, how is that believable, Mike?
Bill, it makes no sense, because under Idaho law and many other state law, the person the alibi is a living human being who can vouch for the defendant's whereabouts, time, date, location, things like that. She didn't have that. She said, we're going to develop an alibi through cross-examination of the prosecution's own witnesses. Oh, and then, by the way, we have the fact that Bryan frequently goes to parks at, like you say, like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. He can't sleep. He just clears his head by going to these parks and looking at the sky. Yeah, okay, sure. But I tell you what, though, Ann, if you're going to prove that by cell phone data, then you must accept the fact that the cell phone data also shows 23 times that he went by the house, 1122 Kings Road. So it's one of those things that she better be careful what she's going to say, because it could bounce back and hurt her. But the alibi was just a shot in the dark, throwing things on the wall, whatever analogy you want to use. It went nowhere, thankfully.
100%.
The Idaho College murders case. A trial date has been officially set, with opening statements scheduled for August 18th, and the judge dealing another blow to the defense. Kana Whitworth has the details. Kana, good morning.
Yeah, wait, good morning. So the judge in the case finding no justification to delay the trial, but opening statements will be pushed by a week, now starting August 18th. Jury selection will remain, though, on August 4th, allowing a full 2 weeks to be completed in the highly publicized death penalty case. Now, the defense for Bryan Kohberger, who is accused of killing Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Gonzalez, and Madison Mogen in November of 2022, has argued their client is innocent, and with his life on the line, they wanted more time. But the judge also denying a request from the defense to present theories of 4 alternate killers to the jury. The judge calling their evidence entirely irrelevant and wild speculation. The 4 individuals had been investigated and then cleared by authorities. Also keep in mind here that on Monday, several witnesses subpoenaed to testify will appear in court in Pennsylvania to determine if they need to travel to Idaho for trial. Among others, they include a local school teacher, a psychologist, a boxing coach, and an employee at the jail. And remember, you guys, this trial is expected to last until November. Michael.
So, that's interesting to me. Like, who are these witnesses? Are they character witnesses for Kohberger? Like, what is their purpose? The one guy who is very interesting to me, and that is the jail guard.
Right.
Because Kohberger said something to the jail guard when he was arrested. He said, "Am I the only one arrested?" Now, people can have a field day with that statement. And was Kohberger being as smart as a fox or as dumb as a fox saying that? Was he trying to misdirect the investigation by implying that there's another suspect, Mike?
It could be. It could be. Although someone did point out, one of the members here pointed out like a week ago, that they think that Ted Bundy or one of the other serial killers that he'd studied said the same thing upon being arrested. So maybe he was trying to be that sort of thing, like, hey, guys, anybody else get arrested? Just to try to be coy. I think that's what he was doing, is just being coy. But I think that's all it is, because there's no evidence of any conspiracy between Kohberger and any other person. Just think about it. It's really rare that you would have 2 people agreeing to, mass murder. And so I think he was just trying to be coy.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, the old expression, he was as dumb as a fox by making that statement. And maybe he was trying to misdirect because he studied the actions of killers. And, maybe he was trying to misdirect. And it's these witnesses, I feel that there's 7 of them going to Monroe County, and they're going to testify in a Pennsylvania court. I would say at least 50% of them, maybe more, won't even be used. What will the defense use them for? The jail guard, perhaps they'll use that statement because that may create some doubt in the mind of the jury. But other than that, I don't see them using any of these people. The boxing gym owner, perhaps the car dealer, maybe that's the guy who sold him the Hyundai Elantra. I don't know, but how would that benefit the defense? That wouldn't.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. We thought originally that they were going to have these people come and talk about Bryan's good nature if he was convicted, doing the mitigation of the death penalty, that phase. Or it's possible that when Ann Taylor is presenting her evidence, whatever evidence she has in her case in front of the jury, that she may want to put 1 or 2 of these people on who would talk about Bryan's good character and the fact that, he demonstrated no propensity for any kind of violence whatsoever. He wasn't a very aggressive boxer. He didn't have the killer instinct. He wasn't into hurting people. That's the only thing I could think that where it would help during the trial and pre-mitigation stage at the end. But by the time those people would testify, all the other evidence by the prosecution would have already been heard, already examined, and already absorbed by the prosecution. So by the jurors. So I don't think the defense has really many cards to play in this case.
I agree. Let me play this from Crime Fix.
Suspects. I break down the new orders from the judge and go over what we know about the people that Kohberger wants to accuse of murder. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Judge Hippler has made up his mind, and Bryan Kohberger's lawyers are likely not very happy. The judge is always no nonsense in his orders, and this time was no different. Hippler has denied Kohberger's request to continue his trial, which is scheduled for August. And he's also shut down the defense's request to tell the jury about other people who could have carried out the murders. It's called alternative perpetrator evidence. Now, we learned a little bit about who these people are in the judge's order. And there's a lot of information in these new documents. Let me tell you, a lot. And we're going to talk about all of it. Kohberger is accused of stabbing 4 University of Idaho students to death. You know their names, but we cannot say their names enough. They are Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. All 4 were found dead in the house on King Road in Moscow on November 13th, 2022. 2 of the roommates were left unharmed, and they will testify at the trial. Kohberger faces the possibility of the death penalty if he's convicted, and his attorneys have said he maintains his innocence in these crimes. Kohberger's lawyer, Ann Taylor, has been in his lawyer since his arrest in late December of 2022. And she says she and Kohberger's defense team, they're simply not ready for trial. She talked about this at a hearing last week.
Looking through the history of this case shows that the defense has met challenges and difficulties along the way, but has been dedicated in meeting all of the deadlines. We have talked about discovery issues in this courtroom before, and that in large part brings us to need a continuance. 68 terabytes of information is a huge amount of information. There have been 23 requests for additional discovery over the span of 2.5 years and 7 motions to compel. When I say that this doesn't come as a surprise, that this comes from the record, I would direct the court to look back to May of 2023 and June of 2023 and our second motion to compel. Included in that was what was known as Exhibit A from the defense, and that depicted how we were receiving discovery. So this is not a new issue. This is something that's been coming up for a long time. We were receiving discovery, but it was such that you would get a file that would say hundreds of photographs, hundreds of pages of reports, each having to be looked at individually to know what was there and then organized.
Taylor has talked before about receiving 68 terabytes of discovery from the prosecution, but the prosecution says much of that is irrelevant. Then Taylor pointed to the media coverage and the Dateline episode that aired last month with information that hadn't been known to the public previously. Dateline claimed Kohberger searched pornography about forcing sex on women who were sleeping, that he searched Google for serial killer Ted Bundy, and that he also searched for news about the murders and his name. Dateline also aired selfies Kohberger took where he wore all black.
Everything that happens in this case continues to be talked about, and this court has a duty, a responsibility to make sure that Mr. Kohberger receives a fair trial. That comes from Shepard versus Maxwell, 384 U.S. 333. And a continuance may be the way that the court can best protect Mr. Kohberger. That comes from Patton versus Yount, 467 U.S. 1025. In addition to what is going on with what happened with the Dateline episode, that's not all. There's a book set to be released just a few weeks from now to be followed by a docuseries on Amazon Prime. There's a claim that there's inside sources that provide information in this case. At the very least, the moment we start attempting to select a jury in this case, those things are going to be on everybody's TV, everybody's social media feed, And some of the very witnesses that will be expected to testify will be taking part in the docuseries at least, and maybe noted in the book. That is in and of itself an exceptional reason for us to have a continuance to let those things play out for a while.
Now, Judge Hippler had suggested last month that he wanted an investigation into the person or people who leaked this information. We'll have more on that in a bit. Ann Taylor also said she needed more time to investigate Bryan Kohberger's life history to prepare for a possible penalty phase. The new special prosecutor on the case responded to that and Taylor's other arguments.
We have life history for the defendant. The defense has amassed significant materials. And I thought we were going to be solely talking about the mitigation case that still needs to be developed. That is not a basis for a continuance. And to the extent there are ongoing discovery from the state that Ms. Taylor alluded to, I can represent that most of what was just turned over was our investigators speaking with witnesses that the defense has disclosed. So that's the nature of that discovery, is us responding. As Ms. Taylor said, people will continue to talk about this case.
You know, we have covered this, Mike, a great deal about, and the judge, you could see in his body language, he is not impressed with Ann Taylor's arguments whatsoever. You know, from the 4 alternate suspects to, I need more time. I need more time. You've had 2.5 years. What do you mean you need more time? And if you felt that you weren't going to be ready, you should have known this a year ago, 6 months ago, and told the court that, you know, I'm overwhelmed with the amount of evidence. I'm overwhelmed with the work we have to do on this. I think I'm going to need more personnel. I'm going to need more resources, and I'm going to need more time. Not at the 11th hour, as Judge Hippler clearly describes that, oh, at the 11th hour, you now want a continuance. Denied. You know, at the 11th hour, you want to charge 4 other people as alternate suspects. Denied. You know, the alibi. I don't find that too amusing either. I'm not, you know. So he, on all of these things that she's tried to protest, you know, didn't Shakespeare say you doth protesteth too much? I think that the judge was not amused, and he ruled on the side of the prosecution on almost every single one of these. And it's not that he was siding with the prosecution. He was using case law to make his decisions, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, he made sound decisions based on Idaho law, and he was not impressed. As you could see, he's looking at Ann Taylor, listening. You know, he's not interacting whatsoever with her. He's probably tired of all the motions. And if she cannot, and she does, and he did note in his decision the other day, how much resources that she has gotten. She has not just a secretary, but she has a dozen people with of all, you know, abilities looking at all the evidence. If she cannot manage her office and get to work for her client in an effective manner, that's on her. There's no way Judge Hippler is going to allow Bryan Kohberger, who's already sitting in jail for 2 years and 7 months, to sit there another 4, 5, or 6 months to where he's finished his 3rd year and beginning his 4th year behind bars before he's brought to justice. He's not having it. He told her flat out, the game is on and you better be ready. That's it. If she cannot do it, if she's not a good attorney, that's on her, and shame on her, because she's not representing Kohberger very well. So Hippler was impressed. He did the right thing.
This is a document from the court. Sealed proceedings with the court and counsel will take place July 28th, 2025 through August 1st, 2025. Jury voir dire will commence on August 4th rather than July 30th and continue until a jury is seated. We spoke about this before. There will be 12 jurors chosen with 8 alternates. It is estimated that the trial itself, beginning with opening statements, will commence on August 18th, 2025 and continue until completed. And it's expected that this trial will run into November. So it'll start on August 18th, and it will continue into November. And a lot of things are going to happen. A lot of evidence is going to be presented. And of course, the top evidence, the most, if there is what you could describe as a smoking gun, in this case, the smoking gun is, of course, the DNA, the single source DNA on the button of the knife sheath. And that, to anyone that is a professional attorney, a professional prosecutor, a professional detective, Matt Murphy from Orange County, California, who is a well-known prosecutor, homicide prosecutor, he, over a year ago, he said the evidence against Bryan Kohberger is overwhelming. And he cited specifically the DNA on the knife sheath. And many people try to dismiss that. Oh, it was planted. Oh, it was this. Oh, it was touch. Oh, it was this. It was that. CeCe Moore on CNN a year and a half ago said DNA should never be used as the only evidence you have against the suspect. It should be used in addition to other evidence. And that is true in this case. Yes, it established probable cause, but there is tons more evidence in this case, specifically circumstantial evidence. And Mike and I have said ad nauseum since we've been covering this case that circumstantial evidence, if there's a little bit of it, if there's tons of it, it is very, very, very powerful. And as powerful as direct evidence in some cases. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, people don't realize most all cases that go to trial, they're circumstantial evidence cases. They're not direct evidence cases. So therefore, jurors can have proven capable of logically, making deductions from the evidence that is gathered and presented to them about guilt or innocence. So therefore, people don't have to worry about, there being a lack of evidence, or, oh my goodness, we don't have a confession, or we don't have an actual eyewitness who actually could see him killing them. Don't worry about that. There's tons of evidence that logically point to Kohberger being the killer.
This is Joseph Scott Morgan, a scientist, a PhD from Jackson State University. And he's a really thoughtful guy, a very smart guy. And I want to see what he has to say on this.
As a forensic scientist and distinguished scholar at Jacksonville State University, he says the DNA found at the scene isn't disputed, but the question becomes why Kohberger's DNA was there.
The trick is, how do you explain it? How do you put that sheath in his hand?
The DNA in question was discovered on a knife sheath left at the crime scene. Morgan says each side will likely use it to tell two very different stories.
Prosecution is going to have to demonstrate how this process works, and they're going to have to do it in a manner in which a jury can understand it.
DNA analysis isn't new, but Morgan says the method used here, called forensic genetic genealogy, can be hard to explain.
But if they can sell it to the jury and explain the process, how it works with forensic genetic genealogy, the jury, I think, in my opinion, will have a really hard time getting past the odds that it could be anybody other than Bryan Kohberger.
The type of DNA found, known as touch DNA, can be left behind by something as small as a single skin cell.
But there is always, in the molecular space, someplace to be caught because you can't plan for everything.
The defense has questioned how the DNA was collected and raised concerns over the use of a private database to identify the match, leading to what they believe is an infringement of Kohberger's privacy.
When does justice supersede, your need for privacy? And that's always been my bone of contention with DNA sampling. The problem with DNA, though, is that the numbers are so astronomical, you have to look for human error.
The trial is currently set to begin August 11th. I'm Joel Huron.
So he explains that so well, yet there is room there for the defense to poke holes in it, right? to say that there's doubt, there's reasonable doubt. But Joseph Scott Morgan, one of the most respected forensic scientists in the country, said, the question is, how did it get there? All right. So the nexus, and that's the word of the week. Right. It simply means a connection, right? And the nexus is a K-bar knife, a knife sheath, and a sharpener that was purchased on Amazon. And there's a record. There is a record on his computer of it from Amazon 8 months before these murders. Circumstantial evidence, you bet your butt it is. Powerful circumstantial evidence, you bet your butt again it is. Yes, but there is a nexus between Bryan Kohberger, the knife sheath, and the DNA on the button, and the order 8 months prior from Amazon of a K-bar knife, a knife sheath, and a sharpener. It doesn't get any simpler than that. No, the police did not plant it. Did they also plant him ordering the K-bar knife 8 months earlier on Amazon and the sheath and the sharpener? No, that is unreasonable. And Ann Taylor is going to try to use that. Oh, the police planted this. To me, that drives me crazy because no one knew who the perpetrator was. So how could they just plant some random knife sheath? And lo and behold, it comes back to the guy in the white Hyundai that had recon the 1122 King Road 23 times. It comes back to the guy who ordered a knife sheath on Amazon 8 months earlier. It comes back to the guy who's a student at Washington State University who likes to go stargazing at 4 a.m. It comes back to the guy who we have 4 other perpetrators that may have done this crime, according to the tips log from the police, that there's no evidence against. Are we all getting the point at all with this?
Yeah, Bill, just think about it. That was a very little bit of DNA on the button of the knife sheath, okay? It was single source DNA, and they ran it through CODIS and a bunch of sites, but since Kohberger had not been convicted ever of a crime where the police would have to take his DNA, it was not uploaded. But when they checked genetic websites, wow, let's see, that tiny little speck of DNA matched his father. So they knew there was familial connection, and they knew that the Mr. Kohberger's DNA that was on a genetic research website, ancestry website, was related, close family relative to that person who left that little single source DNA. And lo and behold, it's Bryan Kohberger. And so when they arrested him in Pennsylvania, as you pointed out, they did a buccal swab. And what was the result? It matched to like 99.99999999999%. There's like 1 in 1 quintillionth odd that it's not Kohberger, and there's not even a quintillion people in the entire world. So we know it's him.
Mike just used the term buccal swab, and we take for granted that people know what that means. And I just wrote it down in the chat. Buccal is spelled Buccal, and what it is really just the inside of your mouth, inside of your cheek. And when a sample of DNA is taken, they just take a Q-tip and they swab the saliva from the side of your cheek. That's known as a buccal swab. And that Q-tip is put in a paper envelope, sealed, taped up. The detective will write his name across the flap so it can't be compromised. And that is how the DNA, it's called an exemplar, is received. And that is compared against the DNA that, in this case, that was on the button of the knife sheath. So I just wanted to explain that because many people hear the term buccal and they think it's Buckel. No, it's Buccal, and it's just simply the cheek, the inside of your cheek, and that's where the police would swab. And they actually can even have the defendant swab it himself and just drop it into the paper envelope. So, it's even that a better of a chain of custody. Yeah, I handed the swab to the defendant. The defendant swabbed the inside of his cheek. I observed him do it, and he dropped the Q-tip inside the envelope, and then it was sealed and it was compared, and it was a match against the. So that's simply the procedure, and that's called a DNA exemplar. We're learning something new every day. I want to play this from Banfield.
Something we don't often get to see. We knew that Dylan Mortensen, a surviving roommate, had texted an Uber driver just after 2 o'clock in the morning. That's about 2 hours before the murders happened. But now we know that she and 3 of her roommates, Bethany, Kaylee, and Maddie, all of whom had just arrived home from a night out, had actually contemplated going out again. The court document reads, and I quote, at approximately 2 a.m., they met up in Kaylee's bedroom and talked for a while before going to bed. The 5th roommate, Xana Kernodle, who was out with her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, was not home yet. The roommates debated going out to the food truck for late night snack, prompting Dylan to send a text at 2:10 a.m. to an Uber driver she knew to see if he was driving. Ultimately, however, the girls decided to just go to bed. Man, that brings to mind a lot of what ifs, doesn't it? What if they'd gone back out? What if they just decided, let's go, let's do it. It's 2 a.m., let's go get more food. Might that have changed the course of history on that horrifying night? Of course, there is a good chance that they'd popped back out to that food trunk, that they still would have been home before the knife-wielding intruder, allegedly Bryan Kohberger, broke in and killed Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan. But we will never know. And that brings me to the second revelation. We knew about Dylan and Bethany's frantic text messaging between 4:22 a.m. and 4:26 a.m. when Dylan tells Bethany that nobody will answer their phones and that she's afraid because she saw someone in a ski mask. And we knew that Dylan then ran down to Bethany's room on the ground floor of the 3-level house. But the court documents now reveal a brand new fact that we never knew. And it is, honestly, it is something horrifying. Again, quoting Dylan. Dylan again tried calling Kaylee and Xana, but neither responded. Dylan then exited her room and began running towards Bethany's bedroom. On her way, she noticed Xana lying on the floor of her bedroom with her head towards the wall and her feet towards the door. Dylan thought Xana was drunk. Once Dylan arrived downstairs at Bethany's room, they locked the door and both made additional unanswered calls to the other roommates. Hours passed, and at 11:50 a.m. the next morning, 6 minutes before the 911 call that you have heard on this program, Dylan called her friends, Emily Allant and Hunter Johnson, because she was too afraid to go upstairs by herself. And the court filing reads, Emily and Hunter met Dylan and Bethany at the bottom floor of the house. Together, Dylan, Bethany, and Hunter started to walk up the stairs to the second floor. When they reached the second floor, Hunter went to the kitchen to grab a kitchen knife. Now, this next part is from Dylan's grand jury testimony. When Hunter came back out, Dylan said, quote, she saw Xana again for a split second, and this is Dylan talking, and just started bawling because she thought she had just like, I don't even know. I thought maybe she was still just drunk and all asleep on the floor. Bethany also saw Xana lying on the floor. Hunter told Dylan and Bethany to, quote, get out. Emily, who had started up the stairs, also turned around after Hunter instructed her not to come any further. They both went outside shortly afterwards, and Hunter exited the house and then told them to call 911. He was pale, white, and mentioned something about someone being unconscious. You can hear a lot of that. You can hear a lot of it on the 911 call. We just envisioned that the banging and the calling out, Xana, Ethan, was at the bedroom door, but it may not have been. It may have been down the hall and around the corner at the stairs. This is where I'm going to stop and bring in Steve Gonzalez. Steve is case.
You know, I just want to mention something, Mike. The actions of Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk are certainly difficult to understand. And the only way I can perhaps understand it, being a homicide investigator, being a 27-year veteran of the NYPD, is a guest we had on our show several months back, Dr. Joni Johnston. And when we questioned Dr. Joni Johnston, a really fine forensic psychologist who specializes in interviewing murderers and serial killers, she said that she felt that Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk were in shock. And that explained, at least to her, their irrational reactions. Almost like they didn't believe. They were seeing something, but they weren't believing what their eyes were seeing. And they weren't processing what their eyes were seeing. They weren't processing their dead friends lying on the floor. It somehow they were seeing it, but it wasn't registering in their brain as what it was. And that is the only way we can rationally think that, why did they not call 911? To me, it's very, very difficult to understand. So they waited almost 8 hours till the next day, almost 12 noon, to call 911. So very, very hard to understand. And I believe that Ann Taylor is going to try to shred them on the stand, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. However, she better be very, very careful, because the jury may not like her mistreating these two victims, these two surviving victims who were traumatized for the rest of their life over the quadruple murders of their friends, Mike.
Yeah, I'd mentioned that one of the things that, Ann Taylor would, the kind of people Ann Taylor wouldn't want in the jury would be older men and women and homeowners. But I forgot to include parents, because if you're the parent of you're the father or mother of young teenage kids or older, you understand how they think and how they don't think. We see the eyes, we see the world through the eyes of our experience up to today. And our experience is law enforcement. You've seen a lot more than even I have seen. And so you think back all of the crime scenes you went to, all the deceased people you've seen in all kinds of horrible situations. We grow accustomed to it. It still bothers you, but you grow accustomed to it. We're dealing with people who are 20 years old, and they thought originally that that Zana was asleep, that she had passed out. And maybe even though they were worried about their friends because they saw that other person walk out of the house, that they probably rationalized that they were unconscious and drunk. And so they were scared, but they didn't think, obviously, that they were killed. In the morning, they probably just figured everybody was sleeping it off. And then they got worried. And then they called Hunter and that other girl. Hunter, I think, did a great job. But yeah, anybody who's a parent who has kids that are young, like that age, like high school, college age, if they're on the jury and they see Ann Taylor trying to shred these girls to bits, remember, all they have to do is listen to the 911 call and try to see, as jurors, what those kids were experiencing, what those 20-year-olds were experiencing at that hour of the morning after they made that call, and they could understand a little bit more. But other than that, people who don't have kids or that kind of experience may have difficulty figuring out why the hell didn't they realize what was going on. And the fact is, their immaturity.
The other thing is, folks are talking in the chat. It was documented that Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, yes, they were drunk. They were both drunk. Oh, sure. That's not a secret. So can that also contribute to their irrational reaction as to what happened? Yes. And no one is denying that. We're not trying to besmirch them or trying to minimize them by saying they were drunk. They were in fact drunk. College kids get drunk, and so they happen to be in that situation. But they are two very, very important witnesses. I want to go back to Banfield. She's with Steve Gonsalves.
Haley Gonsalves' father. He's been a regular guest on the program. Steve, these were details that I found astounding. They seemed to put into place more details of a very confusing picture of what happened that night. And I often stop and I think about you and the other parents, and whether you get a heads up that this stuff is coming, whether you have someone who sits down with you and goes through it and helps you to sort through it. How do you receive this kind of information?
We normally get an email beforehand. We work back and forth. I don't think either party really had an understanding of how to really construct something where you can share information, but not too much information. But the communication's gotten a lot better. I've really grew to like these guys. I mean, I really care about that those people and all the work that they've done. So I think they've always tried to work towards communication, but I'm sure they're very busy, and it's not easy to always remember to keep us in the loop.
It was a surprise.
I just like to say that to me, and it doesn't matter how you feel this, but to me, Steve Gonsalves is one of the heroes of this case. He's a grieving father. He's been the face. He's been the voice of the families. Whether or not the rest of the families want him to speak on their behalf, he has taken on that role, and I think he has really handled himself quite admirably. And I think he's a very brave man, and I have nothing but admiration for him. Your thoughts about it, Mike?
Yeah, Bill. He and his family and the other families, they'll never get over this. They'll come to a point sometime in the future that they can accept it and move on with the rest of their other children and that they have to raise. But I cannot, as a father of 3 daughters, I cannot imagine losing one of my girls. And then how do you go on as a parent, as a dad, with that sort of thing having have happened? He's a stoic individual, and all the respect to he and all of the other parents that have to deal with this.
100%. Let's go back to Banfield.
Surprise to me, Steve, to hear this detail that Bethany got a glimpse down the hall of what now appears to be Xana's open bedroom door, and Xana lying inside that bedroom door, and ran downstairs to Bethany's room. And then at one point, Bethany also saw that same image. But it's sort of just, it's flummoxing to think that they called friends, they called 911 before anybody sort of went to investigate what was happening in that bedroom with the door now open. We always assumed that it was closed and they couldn't get past it.
Yeah, that's definitely a puzzling part of it. But I always assume, you have somebody who's scared, girl, slightly, intoxicated. My own daughter, when my son was playing a prank on her, acting like he was being attacked, him and his mom, Kaylee ran upstairs and hid under the bed and called me at work. So when people are scared, they're young. They don't think the same way as a grown adult does. And I think they were just thinking that something bad had happened, but they didn't want to believe it. They weren't really prepared to mentally accept what was happening. And I totally understand that, because it's not something that we're used to in Idaho. It's not something that is common. It's not even, it's just unheard of. So I chalk it up to that. And I know that there's a lot of forensic, and there's a lot, these girls had their phones on. I already said way back in the day that you could tell when they went up the stairs and downstairs. This is all laid out. Every step has been retraced. So it didn't make a difference in the bigger picture. And And I've always said that there could be blessings for late calls as well too.
Yeah, yeah. It's also just so jarring to get the detail that the girls were all together up in your daughter's room, chatting about, let's all go out again, 2 o'clock in the morning, let's go back to the food truck. And I'm not sure if you heard how I laid it out at the top of the show, but all I can think of is the what ifs, if they had actually decided to go. And I'm wondering how you're processing that information.
I knew a little bit of the details about that. I don't even talk about some of it just because I don't want to hurt some of the people, that are involved in this. If, certain people would have got picked up phones, all those type of things, those are what ifs. But I think what it really goes to your audience is these girls were best friends. And even the last moments of my daughter and Maddie's, they were surrounded with friends and they were in their beds. So just keep that in mind, because there's going to be probably some people are going to try to drag these surviving people through the mud. And up to their very last moments, they were hanging out with these, the people who passed away, planning on doing something fun. And my daughter came down there to hang out with one of those girls. And that's the reality of it. That's the truth of it, not some of the speculation that you're going to eventually hear about.
The culture in this country for colleges, some kids go to college and it's like a 4-year vacation of drinking and, having fun and, do your work. That's the second part of it, or the third part of it. But it is a culture of, and there is a lot of drinking around college campuses. Let's face it. None of us are surprised or shocked. Oh my God, kids are drinking. They're getting drunk. Yes, it happens. It happens. And the University of Idaho is not unusual. They're like any other college campus across this country where kids drink too much. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, this is as you say, this is what you do at college. You party a lot because it's your first time usually being away from family. You're trying to grow up. You're trying to balance, the needs of maybe work if you're a commuter student or if you're a resident student, living, trying to get along with other people, learning a discipline, studying. These are all things. You're adulting for the first time in your life, really for the first time in your life. So it's kind of also like a rite of passage to have a couple of beers and enjoy yourself. Anyone that would condemn, Bethany and Matt and Dylan or the others for being drunk, shame on them. Shame on them. These are 4 college kids going through college, not hurting anybody. And how could they ever possibly think that those people that they were texting were dead or dying and they were killed by a deranged murderer? That doesn't even enter their realm of possibilities at that time.
Absolutely. Let's go back to Banfield here.
Yeah, and shame on those who have cast aspersions on these 2 surviving roommates who have been to hell and back. They're still there. They're not back. And how anyone could set upon them with ridiculous conspiracy theories is beyond the pale. There was something that you mentioned, I think a couple of days ago in an interview that sort of stood out to me. And that was that I think you had a chance to speak with the coroner and got a detail about one of the injuries that your daughter suffered at the hands of this killer. I think it was a punch to the face. Can you tell me what it is that you learned?
I don't go into all the details on it because I want the court to bring it out. I want them to do it. But yes, I feel 2.5 years. The defense has a strategy to have everybody forget. And I'm here to make sure they don't forget. So when I do have to let stuff out, it's because I don't want people to forget that we have a monster. And yes, one of the girls was a little more intoxicated. He was able to go after that. Maddie May first. And my daughter woke up and he struck her multiple times and broke her nose. And and there's a little bit more details to that, but I leave that to them in case that's something pertinent for them to know and to let them release it. but I'm not going to let anyone forget about what this monster did. And I'll leave it at that.
But they were able to give you that detail that that the killer killed Maddie first and then went after Kaylee second?
Correct.
I think there's a lot of forensics that we're going to learn in this trial. I hope you're going to be okay, you and Christy and the family, when it comes time for those testimony days. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, Steve, is that you've learned that Bryan Kohberger called out from work the day after these murders. What do you know about that, and how did you hear this?
There's a thing called a Bryan tally. I've heard about. I've spoken because I was vocal, because I came out. Some people reached out to me. This individual was an employee of WSU. And from there, I learned of some details. So, yeah, there was an investigation, an HR type investigation. And I don't know all the details about it, but I do know these girls felt very creeped out. They talked to people in power and they said, document it. And they started documenting it. And that's how we know that one of the days, the day after he took that photo where he's acting like he's, super confident and got away with murder. He doesn't look sick to me at all. You guys can look at, your audience can go look at it themselves. And I heard that's the only time you ever called in sick as well.
That's unbelievable detail. Steve, I always am very appreciative that you take the time to speak with us. I'm glad you keep your daughter's memory alive and the story alive as well. It's important that nobody forget what happened. Thank you again for this.
Yeah.
But let's start here. You cannot gauge a murder case by the sheer tonnage of the paper documents that it produces. But if you could, Idaho versus Kohberger really would be the trial of the century. Yet another metric ton of motions have just been filed or responded to, each one giving us another sneak peek at the main event, which is now less than 5 months away, the trial of Bryan Kohberger. We've been digging through all these documents.
Well, it's actually less than 2 months away. This report was coming from another time. As we know, the trial is going to start on August 18th. So this was a report from an earlier time.
Throughout the day, and among the revelations is evidence tying the defendant, Bryan Kohberger, to the black balaclava mask that was spotted by a surviving housemate. The prosecutors say they have proof that Bryan Kohberger bought a black balaclava mask, quote, the same type of mask described by Dylan Mortensen, from a Dick's Sporting Goods store in January of 2022.
Mike, there we go again. Circumstantial evidence,
right?
But extremely powerful circumstantial evidence. Extremely powerful.
Oh, yeah, because, look, there's plenty of balaclavas that are sold, and, he bought it long time before the murders. It doesn't mean that he bought it with the intent to kill, but it shows that he actually had possession of one for a substantial period of time and probably could have had it on the night of the murders and the early morning hours of the murders, because Dylan saw someone walk past about 5'11", slim. All she could see was his eyebrows because his face was covered in a mask like a balaclava. Ann Taylor will say that's coincidence, but as the prosecutor, you might say, that's a little bit of circumstantial evidence of guilt.
100%.
That's about 8 months before the murders. And speaking of Dylan Mortensen, the defense is now attacking her description of a mask-wearing intruder with bushy eyebrows. The state says that is Kohberger she's describing. The defense says, well, that witness, that roommate, that surviving roommate, was influenced by the detectives on the case. And they point to the fact that she admits she was drunk that night when she saw a stranger walking past her bedroom door. For what that's worth. In the earlier filings, prosecutors brought up this. Yeah, this is Kohberger's purchase of a K-bar knife, which has never been found, and a knife sheath. That one matched the one found near 2 of the victims' bodies, and Kohberger's DNA, the state says, is on that knife sheath. But the defense now claims that his Amazon purchase and his browsing history that showed he bought a K-bar knife and bought a knife sharpener and bought a sheath, a K-bar sheath. Well, the defense says that browsing history should be inadmissible because at the time he was living with his family and other users could have been doing the typing, searching, and the buying. They also say the knife and the sheath may have been part of a larger purchase with like camping supplies, including a tire inflator, a backpack, and bear spray. That is some good defense work right there. Because if you bought all those things, camping things, bear spray, tire inflator, backpack, and a K-bar knife in Pennsylvania, that would make sense. But if you can't produce that K-bar knife or the sheath or the sharpener, maybe not so much. Don't forget, he was also known to search, apparently according to the state, for a replacement knife and sheath. As for his medical conditions, we've got answers for that now too. His lawyers say that his developmental coordination disorder makes it impossible for Kohberger to be able to slash 4 people to death in such a short period of time. And the state has an answer for that. That a doctor says Bryan's condition was a thing of the past, something that hasn't affected him for many, many years. And whatever he's got left is like the fine motor skills, little things, not big things. I could go on, believe me, but I'm going to stop here and bring in the best resource I can think of in this story, and that is our own Brian Enton. Okay, Brian, let's start with the balaclava. Again, I couldn't believe it. Today, documents showing that they have the receipts. The state has the receipts for the black belt.
I'm going to stop here. It just shows what we have said from the very beginning, that the state has a voluminous amount of evidence against Bryan Kohberger. And as we go over some of it, it becomes apparent that the state has a very, very, very solid case. And I'm not going to continue going over this. We're going to be covering this case as it moves forward toward the trial on August 18th. But you get a taste, you get a flavor of what's going to happen here. And we started the show tonight with picking the jury, which is one of the most important things in any trial, but especially in a capital murder trial where the stakes are so high, because the jury has to be death penalty eligible. That means every person chosen has to be okay with the death penalty. And if they're not, they will not be chosen as jurors. So we all need to understand that. Mike, your final thoughts.
I don't think anyone who has been following this case at all, or maybe people who have recently joined, they don't have to worry that about the case. The prosecution has amassed an amazing amount of evidence, circumstantial evidence against Bryan, and they got the right guy. And so he will get a fair trial. He'll get as fair trial as possible. Judge Hippler will make sure he gets a fair trial because that's what he's entitled to under his constitutional rights. So therefore, nobody has to worry about this. A mistake being made. The cops got the wrong guy. No. There's enough evidence against Bryan to put him on trial. Don't worry about it.
100%. Folks, we went a little longer tonight. We got a little carried away. We were talking about this. We went a little longer than we usually do, but it was great to be with you guys for more than an hour and a half. And I want to thank Mike Geary, who probably has to teach in the morning, and I kept him up a little late tonight. Thanks for staying. Thanks for staying with it tonight, Mike. Folks, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share us with your friends and your family. We appreciate that. We'll police off the cuff real crime stories. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless.
One episode
just ain't enough.